Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, where we bring awareness of sustainable health in a business hustle space. The Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve optimal health. It's Friday, which means it's time for friends sharing facts about health, business, and overall success. In today's episode, we talk to Dr. Dunn, who will educate us on the role of your genes on your mental and physical health. Dr. J has been practicing natural medicine for over 30 years. She is a chiropractic physician and a certified in functional medicine and is an internationally known lecturer on genetics and nutrition, teaching physicians around the world on how to use genetical information to get to the underlying cause of the disease. Her drive to understand the true cause and her passion for helping those who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and attention issues have led her to create this program. She is the author of many books such as The Holistic Kinesiology and Perfect Health in Paradise, available at Amazon. She has built the program, which I mentioned earlier, that has helped many people struggling with mental health issues through genetic testing called My Happy Genes. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me on.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. So what is an interesting fact about yourself that you want to share with the audience of the Natural Health Podcast?
Wow.
Put you on the spot right there.
On the spot there.
I know I can talk about one that you absolutely love dogs. We can talk about that.
Yeah, we were just talking before we came on about dogs. I'm just getting ready to adopt a little golden doodle, which I'm so excited about. Yeah, I love dogs. They're just angels in disguise.
Yeah, so a dog person, not a cat person.
Not really. Not real fond of cats and the smell and the, I don't know, attitude. You know, you're petting them and they're all nice and sweet, and then it's like they're so unpredictable.
So true. I wonder if you can actually tell by the person, by their genes, if they're a cat or a dog person, huh?
Wouldn't that be an interesting study? That would be very interesting.
That definitely would be. So how many dogs do you have at the moment?
Well, I have two, and this will be the third. And the other two are getting older. So, you know, it's I always like to kind of transition them into a newer dog. Not that I want to get rid of them in any way, shape, or form, but you know how it is. It's like I just always have to have a dog, and I don't know. I'm excited about a new addition to our family.
That's so beautiful. Have you got a name ready for it?
Yeah, Timothy for some reason. Timothy. I don't know why, but random.
It is, isn't it? I don't think I've ever heard anyone call the dog Timothy, but great.
Yeah. It's not Timmy, it's Timothy. It's very proper.
Get it right. So every time you're like, Timothy.
Right. You're in trouble, Timothy.
I absolutely love that. Love that. Wonderful. Well, what I start off with the podcast to ask all my guests is to get to know them a little bit. So the audience that's listening gets to know Jay, you know, gets to know you for you. So I wanted to ask you, what have been the key turning points in your life to get you where you are now? Because in your bio, we spoke about you having 30 or so years experience in the natural health field. So what have been key turning points to where you are now?
Oh, what a really good question. Because it's always about that, isn't it? The major turning points in our lives that lead us to a certain profession or a certain direction in our lives. But for me, it was actually getting sick. And I think that's true of a lot of people that go into natural healing is we're looking for some answers for ourselves. And, you know, in my 20s, I had massive migraine headaches and nausea and fatigue. And I just felt terrible. And, you know, went to doctors and they did blood work and said, you know, there's nothing wrong with you. Here, take a pill to cover up the headaches, you know, some kind of painkiller. And I was like, no, it doesn't seem like the right thing, you know, to just cover up pain instead of figuring out what's going on. And they had no answers for me. And so that was confusing to me, having been raised in the traditional medical model. I was like, well, wait, you know, that's confusing. And then when I started looking for answers, went down the natural healthcare, you know, kind of route. Even then, I didn't get any good answers for a long time until I found a kinesiologist who, I don't know if you're familiar with kinesiology or muscle testing.
Yes.
Do you do muscle testing? Are you a muscle tester?
No, I don't do that. No, but I know a number of people that do, and it's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I fell absolutely head over heels in love with it because when I finally ended up with a doctor who could do muscle testing, and he told me why I was feeling the way I was feeling and what I could do about it, changing my diet, taking certain supplements, and, of course, getting adjusted as well. It changed my life. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel better. I feel like a whole new human being. And I was like, I gotta learn how to do that. I don't know what that was. That was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. I've got my arm up in the air and he's pushing on it, but he was able to tell me exactly what to do. And when I did it, it worked. That was the key. It was like, okay, I'm just gonna go with this strange thing and give it a good chance to work. And it did. And from then on, I was just madly in love with muscle testing. So I took every class I could get my hands on kinesiology and started practicing, and I was blown away. This is before I knew anything about the human body. Started doing muscle testing on patients, and they were getting well. They were getting well left and right, and they were coming to me, after they'd failed with a lot of other doctors. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I want to know more. And so I went off to chiropractic school, and then went off to study functional medicine, and I just kind of snowballed from there. I became one of those people who can't stop learning, about the human body. I want to know everything there is to know. I want to know how it works. So constantly taking classes and constantly learning and exploring and trying to figure out the human body and how disease happens and how we get sick and why we get sick. It's an amazing journey. As you know, you're on the same kind of path.
Yeah. And you just talking about that just gets me excited, like just being like, well, why? Okay, so you have this, but why? And similar to what you were saying, you suffered with migraine headaches as you were younger, and here's the pill, so you don't die. But it's kind of like, but why am I getting these? Why do I have these migraines? Why do I have these headaches? And then fortunately for you, you found these individuals in your life that led you down that path to find out why. Right.
Yeah, and that's the key, I think, to natural healing is, in allopathic medicine or traditional, not even traditional medicine, but allopathic medicine. That's their solution is let's cover up the symptoms, as you know. And we as natural healthcare practitioners are going, why? Yeah, but why? And that really led me to the next big turning point in my career, which, after 30 years, I had a really successful practice. People were coming from all over the world to really kind of see me. I had a year waiting list for people to get in. Great results. But I still had this set of people that didn't respond to anything I did. And I'm asking that question, why? What is different about them? I mean, I'm doing all the things that I do normally with other patients, and they usually respond. These people weren't responding. And then I had some health issues still after all those years that I couldn't get on top of. And one of them was depression. It was I had struggled my entire life with depression. And, I just thought it was my fault. It's just my attitude. I got to work on my attitude, do affirmations I don't know. I just couldn't figure it out. I tried everything I could to fix it and nothing really seemed to work. And then a third thing kind of got me thinking that there was something we were still missing. I'm doing chiropractic. I'm doing nutrition. I'm doing blood work on them. I'm doing emotional work. I'm talking to them about their diet, and those things weren't working. And they almost always were. So I knew there was something missing. And then I started thinking about my father, who died at age 55 of lung cancer. Not a big mystery. He did everything, all the things that we know that you can do to get lung cancer, like smoking and drinking and stressing and never exercising and not eating right. And, it's like he did all those things. That wasn't the mystery. The mystery was his best friend did all those exact same things and lived another 30 years. He ended up marrying my mother after my father died. And so it was like, what is that? We as natural healthcare practitioners go, what, you should not smoke and you should not drink all the time and you shouldn't eat right. But, when you see somebody getting away with all that stuff and living fine for another 30 years, it's like, what? Why is that breaking all the rules? And I knew, we kind of just go, oh, well, that's genetics, right? And we just kind of like park that on the side and go, well, that's genetics. We can't get in there and do anything about that. But when I started to look at the Genome Project, when it sort of, in 2006, they really kind of completed the Genome Project and we were able to map out the genes. And then the fun began where they started to look at what do these genes do? How do they work? How do they affect our physiology? How do they lead to a risk of certain diseases? And that's where I found some incredible answers. And, you mentioned the whole like mood and personality thing. And that was one of the first things when I got my genes tested. I found some specific genetic variants. And as we began to look at, okay, well, it's not about, sorry, sucks to be you. You got a bad gene. It's about how does that gene work and how can we make it up for the fact that you have that gene and make your body work better. So for instance, one of the main genes that I looked at for me was the vitamin D receptor. And as a natural healthcare practitioner, you know how important vitamin D is to everything, immune system and bone health and et cetera. And I can't absorb it. So my vitamin D levels were always, really low. And no matter how much vitamin D I took, because I can't absorb it, I don't make the receptor correctly genetically to absorb it. And so I started to look at, well, how does that receptor work? What do I need to do to make it kind of work better to absorb vitamin D? And that's where the answers came in. And that's where it was like stunning what happened. I started to understand the nature of that receptor, what its cofactors were, how to get it working in the body to accept vitamin D, to absorb vitamin D. And when I did that, my body started making dopamine and serotonin, which are the main happy chemicals, right, in the brain. And my depression, gone. I'm not kidding. No exaggeration. Within a week, my lifelong depression was gone. And I was like, I think this is happy. I've heard of it. I didn't really know what it was until I felt it. And it was like, this is what they've been talking about.
It was like a whole new world.
Yeah. It's sort of like being a fish and people are talking about air and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I think this is air, and no, that's not it. Until they, until you experience it, you don't know really what happy is, and so now my set point for happy is up here where it was down here all the time. And I was always having to try to get myself up to, some of balanced space. I don't have to do that anymore. That's where I live, is in Happyville, and it's a much better place to live. And I went, wow, that was stunning. After 40 years, well, actually at that time, it was over 50 years, looking for answers to my own depression. And within a week, it was gone by understanding my genetics. And so, I was on fire after that. And started doing it with my patients, the ones I couldn't get well, and they were getting well. They were coming back in and they were saying, you worked with people who are like chronic patients who are just like always something with them. This is the next thing. And they were all coming back in and I'd say, how are you doing? And they're like, good. Wait a minute. You're never good. What do you mean you're good? Yeah, I'm good. How's your energy? Good. You sleeping? Yeah. Anything hurt? No. Going to the bathroom? Yeah. Digestion's good? Yeah. Holy moly. It was stunning to me. These chronic patients coming back in going, yeah, I'm good. Like, wow. And then I put them on a program designed around their genetics, the supplementation program. And they'd come back in a month and they'd go, yeah, I'm good. And then I wouldn't see them for a couple months, 6 months, a year. So I was able to get them on a solid program, which was, really difficult to do before that. It was always like, okay, now we're going to try this. We're going to clear up your leaky gut. We're going to get rid of parasites. We're going to get rid of viruses. We're going to work on heavy metal toxicity. It was always like whack-a-mole, I call it. And their body was doing what it should do naturally. And it was because we were designing their nutrients around their genetics. And I was just like blown away by the results. And so I thought, I got to bring this to the world because this is big. I think we're on to like the next major breakthrough in natural healing. Yeah. That's a why. That's even deeper why than we had ever gotten to before. Like if you think about, let's take arthritis, for example. Let's say you have arthritis and you go to the medical doctor and he goes, oh, here's an anti-inflammatory. Never asks, why is that there? He just says, oh, yeah, we're going to get you out of pain. Well, this same person could go to a natural healing practitioner and they'd say, oh, well, you have heavy metals going on. We need to do some detox. Or you have an underlying viral infection that's causing inflammation. Or your diet is, you're eating something that's inflaming you. That's the next level of why. And the next level of why below that is genetics. Like what if you have a genetic variant that makes you susceptible to viruses, or susceptible to heavy metal toxicity, or susceptible to those food allergies? And we could get to that piece, work on that piece, then we don't have to detox them. We don't have to take them off certain foods. We can get in there really at the true root cause, which is the genes at the cellular level. So.
Yeah, I love that. That all just gets me so excited. Like I get absolutely excited about this stuff because like you said, you not only looked at the gene that may be causing that, which you're like, okay, you have this gene and, you can just go, all right, well, that's what you have. You actually went and looked at what is this gene? What pathway is it under? What are the cofactors? What is the end result? How does it start? What food starts it? What's the end? Are you getting the end results? And it's like, oh my gosh, and that's probably like it's mind blowing because even if you just look at one gene, you'll spend like hundreds, thousands of hours, and it's just absolutely amazing. And we have so many genes out there that are causing all this stuff. So it's absolutely amazing that you shared with us your turning points. You started with your own health issues, which is amazing because a lot of individuals come to practitioners and they feel like they don't get it. But, most practitioners get it because they've been there or they've seen others being there. So, so it's awesome that you shared that with us, that you've been there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a practitioner more empathetic, and I'm sure you've had your struggles too, and you can, relate to people a little bit better. And
yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I love that you shared that journey with us, and that led you at the end opening up My Happy Genes. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we did, or what I did actually from understanding the genetics, was I created a program called Holistic Methylation, and it's a how-to for doctors, how to work with genes, how to understand the pathways, as you mentioned, when we look at, the energy production pathways where we turn glucose into ATP, which is a basic unit of energy, what happens on the steps all the way down there. And you can have genetic variants along the way that stop that process. So if you think about it logically, if you're having trouble getting from sugar or glucose in the body down to ATP, you're going to gain weight and you're going to be tired. You can't make energy out of your food well. So we teach doctors how to analyze those pathways, from the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, the brain chemistry cycles, the detoxification, histamine pathways, methylation, and the nitric oxide pathways. So we break those down and show doctors how to test for them, how to get a genetic test, how to look at, what are the cofactors that they need to make up for these genetic variants. And so I started teaching that around the country. And eventually I want to teach that around the world. I just put it online. We just uploaded it online, and we have a level 1 and a level 2 for practitioners. And then I started thinking about, that's for practitioners to learn. And then I started thinking about all the people who are struggling out there with mood issues of all kinds. And they're not, some of them are serious, but some of them are just suffering in silence because they don't think there's anything they can do about it. Like me, it was like I never talked about it because, number one, I'm not going to go on any psychotropic drugs. I'm not going to, do anything aggressive. I've done counseling; it never worked. So you sort of accept that, okay, that's the way you are. And I think there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people that are struggling with either anxiety or depression or PTSD or addictions even, or ADHD, attention issues. And this can really help them because we're understanding why that's happening in their bodies. And it's incredibly comforting to know that there's a reason. It was for me, to find out, oh my gosh, it wasn't my fault. There are actual genetic variants that were inhibiting my brain's ability to make the happy hormones. And so everything I tried wasn't going to work because I wasn't getting to that root cause. And I know there's a lot of people out there. So we created this program called My Happy Genes, and it was designed for the general lay people to kind of get that information and start to work with it. And they can get, a diet report. You can get your basic genetic tendencies, where are your genetic tendencies for addictions or depression or ADHD or PTSD, even opioid addiction. We have these risk sliders on our report that show you your susceptibility for those things. And that's number one, to know that, oh my gosh, it is my genes. Gives you a lot of compassion. And then we have a whole gene table where we, report all the genes, and then you can click on those genes to really dive in deep and understand what those genes do, how they affect your body. And it's a great tutorial on you, understanding you and why you are the way you are, and kind of what your risks are for, we all have genes that are in our ancestors' genes passed down, certain risks, like cardiovascular disease or things like that. And when you pop open those genes, you can look at, oh wow, this gene is associated with Alzheimer's or all kinds of medical conditions too. So it isn't strictly mood. And then they can also go to the diet and lifestyle report, which is all based on your genetics. So what about lactose? What about gluten? What about MSG, salt, fermented foods? Intermittent fasting even, is not good for everybody.
100%.
What's your best diet? Keto, high protein, low protein, high fat, low fat, high carb, low carb. You can get a sense of that through the genetic test, and that's a great place to start. Like you were saying, the little steps, every little step toward doing the right things around your genes makes a big difference. So that was where we wanted to go with that. And then we have a bunch of reports for the practitioner, because we wanted the supplementation to be in the hands of somebody who could really monitor you, because they have a powerful effect on, if we turn on some genes that are going to make your brain make serotonin and you're already high in serotonin, that can be a bad situation. So we wanted somebody to be there monitoring you when they start turning genes on, essentially, getting them to express in a certain way and changing.
And like you said, someone might be like you, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, is this happy? It might actually bring on more anxiety and more, right. So they need that support in regards to, well, this is what may happen. This is what it can occur. And this is how you may feel. And if instead of someone just reading their report and being like, oh, okay, cool. And then feeling those feelings and having no one to actually bounce it off. But then you go to a practitioner that understands that and they go, well, this is what's might happen. And you may feel like this. If you do it, we're going to adjust your supplementation. This is what's supposed to work. So many milligrams of, B9 and all that stuff is supposed to work. However, it actually may not work on you. We need to put it down because it actually may make you even more anxious.
Right. Exactly. You said it very well. So that somebody monitoring you and tweaking the program in case anything happens, and just keeping a close eye on you is a good idea. So we have all these doctors now trained all around the United States, some in Canada. I think we might even have one in Australia. I believe we do have one in Australia. I'll have to look in it. There was one guy that was reaching out and taking our classes and stuff from out there.
Yeah, beautiful.
But we're hoping to reach the world now that it's online. Now that my classes are online, anybody anywhere can take them. So even lay people, if they want to learn this, they can do it. And I think I'm pretty passionate about that. And I know it sounds like you are too, empowering people to understand what's going on in their bodies, instead of being that person who says, don't do this, don't do that. It's like, no, let's do this together. I want to be your coach.
Yeah, like I always say when someone sits down in front of me, I'm like, I know a lot about the human body, but I know nothing about your body. That's what I say. I know so much about the human body. I know how it's supposed to work, but about your body, I know absolutely nothing. And this is why you're going to sit here with me and share so much. And I'm going to ask you so many questions and, and all this stuff, because you're going to open up your body to me.
Beautiful. I love that. That's a great attitude.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's so relieving, especially, when you get somebody in who's never been to a natural healthcare practitioner. It's funny because in the medical world, I don't know about Australia, but over here, you have about 28 seconds to tell the doctor what's wrong with you. Where we
might have 25.
25 over there. Nice. Where we go, well, tell me more. And they're like, really? You want to know? You're like, yeah, I want to know everything. I want to know your sleep habits. I want to know your stress levels. I want to know what's happening in your home life. I want to know, do you poop? All the things. We want to know it all, because it all points to us understanding, like you say, understanding them, their body, and what's happening there. And so they start to get in touch with their own body. They go, oh, well, now that you mention it, I think I do have that. It's funny how out of touch a lot of people have become, because the doctors are saying, look, I understand your body. You just sit back and I'll take care of it. It's like, no, we're over that. We're over it. It's not working. 100%. That model doesn't work,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that information in regards to your key turning points in your life. I mean, there's been so many, and so many people are thankful that has been so many, because at the end of the day, this is the result of it, which is an amazing program, an amazing product that you've put forward, which is absolutely amazing. So, you should be very proud of yourself putting that forward. And, all those times that you're sitting there and you're researching, it's coming it's coming to fruition, which is an amazing thing to see. But, and I guess back in the day, success for you would have been a lot different to what success is now. So what does success look like for Jay now?
That's a really good question. You have good questions. That's excellent. Success is the program working. And, it's funny because when I started getting into natural healing, the first time I worked on somebody and I got great results, they said, "Thank you. You gave me my life back." And it's like, yes, that's what I want to hear the rest of my life. And that's my reward. It's really not about money. Money's nice. I don't want to poo-poo it at all. I enjoy money. But to me, the biggest reward is people getting well and feeling better and experiencing their body and understanding their body and experiencing the benefits of natural. Program can reach a lot more people than, one-on-one. We can only do so much, right? How many people you see during the day is just a few. Like I could only see, about 8 people a day, because I do spend, a good chunk of time with them. When I taught doctors, I could reach, 100 people at a time. But this program, I was hoping to reach millions. So success to me would be to reach millions of people and help them be happier and healthier and more content. And it's interesting because contentment is an interesting concept. At least in the United States, we're never content. We're always like more, bigger, more money, more cars, more houses, more.
You've definitely passed that on to us Aussies here.
Really? Yeah. Sorry about that. That's, we look at Europeans and they go, "Yeah, I'm going to take a couple hours off for lunch." And we're like, "Do you know how much stuff we could get done in 2 hours? Gosh, what do you, slackers." But at the end of the day, it's like we're exhausted and we're not happy, no matter how much we get, no matter how much we accumulate, how much we do. It doesn't lead to happiness or contentment. And so one of the really interesting things is that when you get the brain balance, there's this level of contentment that happens. And we're seeing it with addicts, even with like meth addicts and heroin addicts. I've seen it happen where they just go, I don't even have any desire anymore. And it's not just short-lived, it's long-term. And it's because we're flooding the brain with dopamine, and dopamine is sort of our reward hormone. If we get the body making dopamine naturally and get the levels up, there's this level of contentment that happens to where you're not like, "Oh man, I got to get more. I got to earn more money. Sleeping is a waste of time. Let's go." That's very cool. So I think it can change the world, and and maybe calm us down a little bit.
Yeah. I love that that's your view of success. It's it's selfless. It's very, you're giving. It's very you kind of like, you felt this content, you felt this happiness, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, everybody, look at this. Come have a look at this." You just want to share that with everyone.
Right. And so what we tried to do with the My Happy Genes program was recreate what we were getting in the clinic. And so we created this software algorithm that kind of, calculates your genes and looks at your biochemistry. And then you do a symptom questionnaire. So it kind of chunks all that information and then spits out this supplement program, for the practitioner to look at. But the whole goal is, all of that, just this level of happiness. The world could sure use that. Right now, especially. And we're hoping to create a couple of nonprofits, one for homeless, that I have a big heart for homeless people, because they're usually addicted to something, or have mental health issues, or both, often both. And we just throw them away. I mean, we just don't even, we feed them, but that doesn't solve anything. And it's just this, you look at them and you go, wow, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's father, somebody's brother, somebody's family, and they're just sitting on the street, and not a good.
And it's definitely a brain imbalance. Like I know one day I thought I'll do something amazing. I got some gift cards, right? And I went around Melbourne and I went to the homeless, and I didn't just give it to them. I actually sat down and I was like, hey mate, how you going? Look, here's $25, go get yourself a meal or something. But I wanted to find out, like, are you, like, how you going? How long you been on the streets and things like that. Oh. And the recurring thing that kept happening was I feel better on the streets because I have a community and people understand and I belong. It was so interesting. So then it goes back to us wanting to belong, It's so interesting. And then he was like, he goes, I could go and get some, a house or something. He's like, but I actually have a family here. That was like a few of the people, there's different cases. Like this one guy's house burnt down. He's like, I literally have nowhere to go. My house burnt down and I'm in so much debt. So, and how much brain imbalance that would cause also is so interesting. So I love that you're wanting to do, a non-for-profit around that. So, and it's true. We kind of do leave those people on the side and we just walk past and look down at them in a way.
Yeah. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to help. And that's hard. I remember being in New York City and I'm stepping over people because they're just everywhere. They're all over the sidewalks. And there was one guy, this is where it just really hit me. He had this sign in front of him. He said, I'm dying of cancer. Please help me get a hotel room where I can die comfortably. And I'm like, are you kidding? This is so sad that that we can't even take care of those people. And the other group are the vets, our vets over here, a lot of them, PTSD, suicide is really common. They're suffering and not a lot of good answers there either. Medication is not helping, and it's creating a lot more problems than it's solving in some cases. In some cases, it saves people's lives. I don't mean to poo-poo medications altogether. There are some times,
of course, 100%,
absolutely necessary. But for others, it doesn't seem to work. So I would love to help that group too. Kind of get their feet on the ground and get back into life and not have these constant anxieties and losing sleep and wrecking their home life. So that's where we're going. That's the big picture. As soon as we get our balls rolling and get some generating some income there, that's what we want to eventually give back.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. I love that. And I love talking to business individuals who actually, are at the stage of their business, at the stage of their career where, they just like, I just want to give back now. Like, even though I believe, we should always give throughout our whole career, but there's that, I think it's the hierarchy that we come to, Mellows. Is it Mellows or Mallows hierarchy that we come to and we just want to give at the end? Maslow's, yes. Yeah. And we just want to give at the end. That's the highest thing, is about serving, Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and again, that comes from that contentment. It's like, okay, I have everything I need. How do I give the rest, and how do I help other people achieve that?
Yeah, that's absolutely cool. Beautiful.
Like that. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about today's topic. I know we've spoken a lot about it already, but I'm so excited about what we're about to find out from you and all the knowledge and experience that you have. So as we know, research has confirmed that our genes are absolutely directly related to our mental health and wellness. So let's talk about genes, DNA. What is it? So the audience knows actually what it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Basics.
I kind of tend to just, go there. So what happens is you have a code, your genes have a code. They're your blueprint, essentially, for making certain enzymes in the body, certain proteins and tissues, et cetera. And every cell has the same DNA code, the same blueprint. But so if you inherited from your dad, so you get two sets of genes, you get one from your dad, one from your mom. If you've got the wrong code for a certain enzyme, let's take, for instance, lactase. That's the enzyme that breaks down lactose, right? The milk sugar. If you got the wrong code for making lactase, one from mom, but the other code is the normal code, then you're about you're affected a little bit, but not a whole lot. But if both parents gave you the wrong code for making that lactase enzyme, then you're likely going to be lactose intolerant. You're not going to be able to break it down because that enzyme isn't going to be made correctly in your body. That's one that I think people can understand. And it makes people, intolerant of dairy products. So they may feel, digestive issues or whatever. They can't break it down, makes them stuffy, all the things. Same thing happens in, let's say, the gene for the vitamin D receptor that I was talking about. Again, one gene from mom, one gene from dad. If you have the right code, then you absorb vitamin D well. If you have one gene that's the wrong code, then it's going to impair your ability to absorb vitamin D by about 30%. Both codes, the wrong code, that can impair your ability to absorb vitamin D by 70%. That's a big hit. So let's say, you have that vitamin D receptor, which I did, homozygous, both codes, wrong code. My ability to absorb vitamin D is reduced by about 70%. So that's huge. Now, vitamin D is critical for many things. One is it activates other enzymes that gets our brain making dopamine and serotonin. And so that was the big deal for me. But the other thing, and I forgot to mention this, is genetic variants are associated with a higher risk of lung cancer when you smoke in the vitamin D receptor. So there was my dad. And I went, oh yeah, okay, that explains a lot. Probably my stepdad did not have that gene and he went around smoking and he was fine. But the other thing it does is activate T cells, so you can have, for me, I was always fighting Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue syndrome for 40 years since I had mono when I was 16. And couldn't get on top of it no matter what I did. I mean, I could manage it with natural healing, but I never really got on top of it. And then once I started working on my vitamin D receptor, my body started making T cells, which is our immune system. It's like it activated my immune system to the maximum capacity. So then when your immune system is activated, it can go in and kill viruses, bacteria, yeast, fungus, parasites, all the critters that have kind of hang around. You probably see patients all the time with parasites and viruses and, all the things. And so we didn't have to work on that anymore. If we upregulate the immune system through understanding the genetics, then I don't have to fight viruses anymore. The body does it. It does it very beautifully. We're just loading the gun so it can go in there and get it. And then, but then we look at its effect. Once we turn on the vitamin D receptor, it affects other genes. So for instance, it's going to make more dopamine. Dopamine is broken down into norepinephrine and adrenaline, right? So the body's now making more adrenaline. Well, if you have the gene where you don't break down adrenaline, that can create a problem. So you got to look at the interrelationship of genes. So now this person is going into anxiety attacks because they don't make the gene correctly to break down adrenaline, and they're like awake all night, and they're going, I'm going to get you. I'm coming to get you. So you have to look at, do they have that gene? And if so, we have to work on that gene too, at the same time that we work on the vitamin D receptor. And then there's another gene too. So if we're upregulating the production of serotonin, we have to make sure that they can break down serotonin. And that's the MAO gene. Maybe you're familiar with that one.
Yes.
That's the warrior gene. So if they don't make that one correctly, we just send them into irritability, anxiety, and just aggression. They turn into a total grouch monster. So again, we got to look at what's the relationship. We have to look at the genes in relationship with each other. And that was the thing, that we were doing that was very different. A lot of people are looking at, oh, you have the VDR gene, take these supplements. We're looking at, do you have the VDR and the MAO or the
Yes, and that is key. And that's what I've found. You can look at, sorry to interrupt you, I just got excited because you can look at that one gene and then supplement it. But what effects is that going to have on the cycle 100% down the other pathway? Yeah,
you have to look at that. And that's what we found kind of accidentally. So we were turning on methylation, and you probably know what methylation is, where you upregulate your production of methyl groups, and that turns on detoxification to maximum capacity. And people were getting really sick because they're dumping heavy metals and chemicals and pesticides all at once. And they're calling me up going, I feel terrible. Oh my God, my head hurts. It's oops, what do we do? And so we kind of came at it that way in our in our clinic, we had this whole team that was working on it, and we were like, oh my gosh, what's happening there? We had heavy metal testing done, and sure enough, the body's dumping all these metals. I'm like, wow, what did we just do? We didn't even touch the detox pathways, but the body's doing it. It's like, we got to make sure that doesn't, come on too fast. So we had to manage that. So it sounds like you've already run across this, where you have to look at the interrelationships, and that was the key. That was really the turning point for our system, understanding the interrelationships of the pathways in the body.
And each person's different, isn't it? And
yes,
yeah, it's crazy. So can we change our genes? Does it determine the way we are? Like, is that like if we, got the gene from mom, got the gene from dad, and that's it? Can we change that, or is that just the way we are?
No, you can't change your genes, but you can change the expression of your genes. And
please explain.
That's the epigenetics. The phenotype can change, not the genotype. So that, your genes are always going to be your genes, supposedly. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they will change. But you can change the way they express, very much so, very powerfully. Even Bruce Lipton talks about this, how our emotions change our expression of our genes. But nutrients do too. So for instance, again, that vitamin D receptor, think of it this way. So here's your receptor. You have genetic variants. It's closed. Vitamin D trying to get in there, it can't. If we take certain cofactors, it changes that conformation. It opens it up. D can get in. So now you've changed that way that gene expresses, that enzyme expresses, I should say. And when that happens, it changes the conformation of that enzyme and allows it to work right. So all the enzymes in our body have cofactors or coenzymes, and they're basic stuff. They're vitamins and our minerals and cofactors. And I get this question all the time. Well, then why don't I just take a multivitamin and just like flood the body with everything it needs all at once? It's a disaster because what we talked about, certain nutrients can upregulate a pathway that you don't want upregulated, because it's going to be a problem for you genetically. So what we do is we design your program around your genetics. So it may be like, okay, you need a little more vitamin K2 and A and D, but we also have to put it in with magnesium and zinc, but no selenium, and B6, but no B5. It's very individual. So, and very unique to you. So these multivitamin is not going to do it. It's not like, the body's going to get rid of anything extra there, so I can just throw that in.
That way. Yeah, and I guess the audience that's listening might be like, okay, well, I did go to the chemist and I got myself some B vitamins or some magnesium, and I took it and it didn't work, or I took it and it made me anxious, or I took it and I couldn't sleep. Well, this is why. Exactly,
because it's your genes. And when we look at, things like turmeric, I think everybody in the natural healing world knows that turmeric is an anti-inflammatory, but it's really bad for certain genetic variants, including the MAO, which sounds like you are familiar with. It'll block the MAO from working correctly and cause serotonin excess in some people and make them really grouchy. Green tea, same thing. It can block your ability to break down adrenaline. So there is no like one size fits all in anything.
Yeah.
Well, water, I take it back.
Yeah.
We all need water.
100%, and good quality water. We always talk about the quality of the water, 100%. Yeah. So look, you are the founder of My Happy Genes.
Yeah.
You've spoken a bit about it, but how is it different to any other gene testing platform? I mean, people would have heard about My DNA, Ancestry, and so forth, but how is it different?
That's a really good question too. We were a bit dismayed by the amount of data that we were getting out of Ancestry and 23andMe. They only check for 40,000 or fewer SNPs, and we're checking for 376,000 on our array. That's number one. Number two, they're selling your data. So if you're not aware of it and you just sign those terms of privacy,
we make a big point of that. They are selling your data. Like, just know that. That's huge, and you need to understand what that means.
Right.
Please know what you're doing and where you're getting yourself into. You're like, that's a key point.
Yes, it's scary. The more we get into genetics, the more that's a little bit scary to put it out there. Who knows what's going to happen? You're going to get denied employment or insurance or whatever down the line. It's just a good idea not to share that. Who knows? I don't mean to be paranoid or, but I think it's a good idea to protect your privacy.
100%. I would agree 100%. So it's glad that. So My Happy Gene doesn't sell your data.
We don't. We on our test, it's only tracked by a barcode. So when you register your kit, it has a little number there, and you register that, and it goes to our lab. We have a private lab. They process the data and they send it back with that barcode number. Never your name. Your name is never on it. 30 days later, they destroy your sample. So it's not going to go anywhere. It's dead.
Amazing.
That information comes back to us, and you can put whatever name you want on it. Again, I put Mickey Mouse on mine, just so, put it on there. So your privacy is protected all the way through. As much as we can do it. Data breach happens, but if you don't have your personal information there, then it won't happen. The other reason we wanted to go is to get our own DNA testing is the saliva. A lot of people were having trouble spitting into that tube. And so we're using a swab. It's easier for kids and it's easier for older adults. And I don't know. Did you ever do 23andMe or Ancestry?
No, I haven't done any gene test, but I'm keen to get your one done, and we'll talk about that after. So I'm keen and the main reason why I haven't is due to all those things that I've been researching, and yeah.
Ours costs a little bit more, but our data sample is so much bigger, and so it is a little more expensive. And it's unfortunately, it's only available in the United States so far. We're going to be expanding to the world. That's my other big dream. I'd like to get distributors, throughout the world. Maybe somebody in Australia and Canada and Europe as well. But I can hand send you a DNA kit. And we can do it.
Awesome. And then we can do a follow-up podcast and we can go into it.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll read your report together online. We'll discover all about that. Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm keen. I think I already know. I believe I have a very slow COMT gene, with a number of other ones, but that's just my. I've written down like a list. I've already got it on Word, like what genes I think, and then it'll be really interesting to get it and be like, oh. Yeah, I bet you are, because it's interesting that the comped people, I call them comp people, are very bright and usually, just interested in everything, very smart, a lot of energy, just very fun to be around. They have a hard time though shutting it off. They can't. They're always thinking, it's like, oh, I could do this and I could do that. Sleeping is kind of tough for a comp person. But they're my favorite people. They're usually just a lot of fun to be around, but I know they struggle with anxiety. Do you have a lot of anxiety? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Anxiety and just, like just being like, okay, I've got this idea. I've got to make this happen. Time's running away. And then just being like, no, but I've got to do this. And sometimes a lot of concentration, you're just like, I'm really going to do this. And then you just find that hard. So, and I used to give myself a lot of, about it, because I'm like, why aren't I just focusing? And then I learned a lot about genes and stuff like that. And it'll be interesting when I do the test. And then I'm like, oh, maybe it's just that. And then, but it'd be interesting to have a look at.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like your comp. It sounds like big time. Yeah, they're very creative and but a little ADD. Like,
yeah. Let's go do this. Let's go do that.
But yeah,
I love
it.
And
it's interesting because we also look at some genes that are entrepreneurial, and I imagine you have those too. The DRD3, the dopamine receptor 3 is very much.
Yeah, I've got a question about that. I was going to ask you about the DRD3 gene being entrepreneurial and how it impacts business professionals. So yeah, you can go and talk about that now.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because just about across the board with natural healthcare practitioners, I find that they have it, and it's usually we're the ones who. We don't like to be told what to do. We can't work for other people very well. We have our own ideas about how things should be done, creative. We're always thinking about, hey, we could do it this way. This could be better. Just thinking of better ways to do things. And we don't follow recipes well. We're like, oh yeah, a little bit more cinnamon in this would be really good. Or I could put this in there. I put nuts in there. Again, that's that creativity, but also the entrepreneurial piece of it is kind of fascinating. And when I look at, I had a patient recently he's a pararescue guy, and he goes in military, and he goes over to these really intense rescue situations, dives, just jumps with a parachute in and rescues people. And I looked at his genes, and he has 0 DRD3s. He will follow orders to the T. So it's just fascinating. And, I look at my brother he's worked for this company. He's just a small cog in the wheel of this big company, goes to work doing the same thing every day, comes home, does the same thing every day. And for us DRD3s, we'd be like, no, take me now. Take me. Go. I'm out.
But and we need those individuals. It's amazing. I look at them and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, thank you so much for doing what you do. Unfortunately, I can't. Yes. But what you do keeps society rolling. It keeps it going, which is amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's really cool. It'd be nice if we could use this like in the employment kind of capacity and say, I don't know, the best job for you is this, or you'd make a good manager, a good leader, or finding the best job for them in a corporation or something.
Yeah. See, I worked in HR previously in my past life.
And
really? So that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I've had a lot of organizations who wanted to do personality tests and so forth before they hire, especially manager roles. They wanted to see all that. So it was really interesting. Putting the gene aspect in there would just be mind-blowing.
I think it would. If we could stay away from the thought that there might be some discrimination there, like, oh, well, sorry, we can't hire you. You have the gene. That would be tough if we can get
true.
That. That's so it's a slippery slope there.
Yeah, 100%.
I always thought it'd be fun to do a genetic like matchmaking kind of thing. Match people up with
that. Would be so interesting, wouldn't it? That would be very interesting.
Yeah. I've looked at couples. I've looked at some couples that were like an amazing couple together, just really well matched. And I'm stunned at what I find. Often they're very similar, and you go, you guys aren't related, are you? But with some minor differences, so that they really aren't. But they're often like so very, very close, but not exact. And they're the ones who seem to do the best. Or, I'm sure there are complementary kind of things, like a comp. You wouldn't put 2 comps together; they would drive each other insane, and it would just be constant stress. You want
it would be constant stress.
So you want somebody who's going to balance you, calm you down.
100%. Yeah. So now we've spoken a little bit about the genes and things like that, but I wanted to know, we're talking about mental health, right? And you've spoken about depression, anxiety, but what role do our genes actually play in the relations to our mental health, such as irritability, aggression, behavior, and so forth? I know you've spoken a little bit about it, but is there anything else that they play a role in?
Yeah, very much. The irritability is interesting. Early on, I saw this with some patients. They'd come in and they were, I had this guy, he had MS. He had been fairly recently diagnosed with MS, and his wife brought him into the room and accidentally hit his wheelchair against the side of the door. And he turned around. He's like, Emily, watch where you're going. And he starts going off on her. And she just did kind of one of these and looking at me like, eh. And, I said, so what's going on with you? And I started talking to him, and I put him on a program, put him on the genetic program. And he came back in a month later. And she wheeled him in. She didn't hit the door jamb that time, but, wheeled him into the center of the room, and he turned around. He said, thanks, hon. And he was a whole new person, just sweet, kind, just like, wow. And so she's standing behind him, and I'm asking him, how do you feel? Do you feel any different? And he's like, no, not the same. She's behind him going, she's like, oh my God. He's like he's so nice to be around now, and it just completely changed his personality. So that has been fascinating to see those changes. People calm down. People just lose that irritability. I have a warrior gene too. I have an MA. I have several MAOs. I have 5 of them. And when my physiology is off, I'm pretty darn grouchy. I'm not any fun to be around. But when we work with that gene and it breaks down those grouchy hormones, man, it just calms your brain down, and you're just like, oh, okay, why? I don't know why I went off on you. I apologize. You know, I don't know what that was about. And we completely forget why we were mad. I don't know what that was.
Yeah.
When it often was physiology. And we think about our physiology drives our emotions a lot of times, and not the other way around. I mean, it can go both ways, but think about your anxiety, you know, in those times when you're like, and then you go, must be because I have a lot to do, or whatever. We make up a story, but it's really your physiology driving the reason. Yeah. And when we calm your brain down, your brain goes, yeah, I'll get to it. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. I'll figure it out. You know, and it's like, wow, it's just different. When we do emotional work on people, I know in the past, you know, I would do some emotional balancing on people, and some people were just like an endless well of like this issue. My dad yelled at me when I was 5. My mom, you know, spanked me. We had a car accident. Bam, 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 bam. All these things. We all have all those traumas. But when you get the brain balanced, to get their brain chemistry balanced, it's down to like 2 or 3 major events. You clear those, bam, that patient is like completely different. So it works so much better. And all the things we know how to do work better when we have that baseline of balanced physiology. You know, the brain is balanced, our detoxification is happening, our energy production is happening, histamine is breaking down, everything is sort of like right where it should be. Then your acupuncture or your chiropractic or your homeopathy or your emotional work all works, you know, so much better because you have a foundation for working with the other issues. So it's interesting.
100%. I feel that 100%. I definitely can relate to that. So let's talk about some genes now. I'm interested in. So let's talk about some genes for mental health, right? So what gene would impact someone who's impacted by, let's say, anxiety? Because some individuals that are listening to this podcast might be anxious and they're like, you know what, that's just me. I'm anxious and that's it. Yeah. What are some genes that actually affect that certain anxiety?
Well, the big one was the one you mentioned, the COMT, and that's the catechol-O-methyltransferase is what that stands for.
I'm glad you can pronounce it.
And it breaks down your adrenaline. So if you think of, you know, adrenaline is your like anxiety hormone, you can't break it down. It's going to stay in your system. And it keeps us in what we call sympathetic dominance, where your body never kind of relaxes. That's a big one. There's another one called the GAD, G-A-D, and it breaks down glutamate. And glutamate is another anxiety causing hormone in the body. If you can't break it down, it actually causes neurological damage. It could kill your neurons in the brain and cause all kinds of neurological problems as well. It's normally made into GABA, and GABA is like our calming neurotransmitter. So you can see, you know, if glutamate is high and GABA is low, you know you have a genetic variant there and you're not turning glutamate into GABA. So that's a biggie. The MAO that we talked about, the monoamine oxidase, also causes the serotonin to be too high, which can cause anxiety as well. So it's interesting, if you have a combination of the COMT and an MAO, that's irritation and anxiety, double anxiety, and that can cause OCD, a little obsessive compulsive disorder, which can, you know.
Because a lot of individuals who have anxiety may have that, and there's different degrees, you know. Like for myself, I think like I had it like what happened was this huge stressor happened to me in my life about 20 something. And then I was really, like you would say, OCD about a few things. Even like looking back at it now, I'm laughing, like even crossing the lights, I would have to like wait a few things and then cross the lights. It was so weird. I wouldn't do that now because I don't have that stress on me now. So maybe it's interesting for the audience to understand that gene may activate at certain times in your life. You may not have it all the time.
Right. Well, if you think about it, so if this is like a set point for anxiety and you genetically are up here, add in a traumatic event and you're up here. So that's when PTSD happens, or, you know, the OCD, like you say, that can kick in and you start, you know, counting steps, or you're washing your hands all the time, or you're, you know, all the things that, you know, kind of can clue you into your little OCD. Did I lock the door? Did I turn off the stove? Did I, you know, that compulsive sort of thing that happens. you're set up for it. You're already your set point is higher than normal. So if we can reset your genes down to here, then, your body's going to come down and your body's going to calm down, and you can kind of handle those things, get on top of them, get, maybe like, a little emotional balancing or whatever, and get clear of those kind of issues. So that's where the compassion comes in. I call it genetic compassion. Understanding that it's not you, it's not your fault. We blame ourselves. We beat ourselves up, I think, pretty readily. And, it was interesting in things like weight. I found one of the first times I saw this with obesity, I had a woman who flew in from New York, and she was so big that she had to buy 2 airline seats to get there. And, I knew she was overeating. You look at her and you go, okay, there's some eating going on here. You can't get that big without, eating. But I'd ask her, how's your diet? It's pretty clean. I eat pretty good. Often they're embarrassed. They don't want to admit it. They don't, it's like, it's got to be something else. Well, I put her on one of the methylation programs or the genetic programs. And she called me up a week later and she was crying. And she said, oh my God, she said, I didn't tell you this, but every night I had to have sugar, and often I would eat a whole bag of Oreos before I went to bed. I couldn't not do it. Like I didn't have the willpower to stop it. She said, on this program, I don't want it. She said, I can't believe it, that it's not my fault. I'm blown away. And the weight just kind of came off because she was able to just push it away. She didn't want it. And that was the interesting thing we were finding, is if you get the brain and the body balanced, it doesn't want sugar. It doesn't want alcohol. It doesn't want the crap. So all these years I was telling people, now don't eat alcohol, don't eat sugar, don't eat gluten, don't eat, whatever. And they would do it for about a minute, and then they'd go, and because of the urges were so strong. But if we change their physiology, they don't want it. The same thing was happening with drugs, with methamphetamines and heroin and alcohol and other drugs. We found that the body stopped wanting it, once we get it balanced. Same with food. So it was like I started looking at things very differently, with a lot more compassion, and talking to people like, this is not your fault. There's some choices, yeah, but for the most part, your body is craving sugar because you're not turning it into energy, and your brain needs sugar, and it's going to drive you to the 7-Eleven to get that quart of ice cream, because it's starving to death. Your brain will start to starve if you can't turn food into energy, and it'll make you go get that food.
And that's such an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? It's a totally different aspect.
It changed everything for me, how I looked at healthcare issues. So now I encourage people, tell me about it. What do you crave? And fess up, because there's no judgment here. This is about something's going on in your body. If you're craving something abnormally, is it salt? Is it sugar? Is it sex? Is it alcohol? What is it? And let's balance your brain and see what happens. And I'm just stunned by what can happen with that. So it gives people a great deal of compassion for themselves, and me compassion for them. And it's huge, because we look at obese people and we go, put down the ice cream, go out for a walk, and they can't. Often, because their body isn't turning food into energy, they don't have any capacity for exercise. There's this exercise intolerance that happens. And you tell them, go out and walk, and they feel terrible. It just wrecks them because there's no fuel in the tank.
Yeah. Well, you hear a lot of people say I don't have the motivation, and that'll probably come from genes also.
Right. Yeah. From genetic variants. And also, damage to the mitochondria. That's the other piece of it. The environmental piece that kind of fits into the genetics and can turn genetics on is, that's chemicals and heavy metals, pesticides, the glyphosates. I'm sure they're a big problem over there as well. Radiation, the electromagnetic fields, all of those things can damage your mitochondria and then cause other genes to express. So that's kind of a big deal. That's where the rubber meets the road, as far as, us talking to them about your diet and your lifestyle and your environment.
Yeah. And that's a good point. It's kind of like when people say, I've never felt the same since I've moved into that house, since I started that job, since I did this, because it's kind of like, okay, something affected those genes.
Yeah. And that's, again, where we listen for those clues. It started when, and what were you doing, and where were you, and what was happening.
Yeah, 100%. So we've spoken about a few anxiety genes. Would they be the same for depression, or would they be different?
So depression, often, very, very often, it'll come from that vitamin D receptor, because that's so critical for making dopamine and serotonin. But it also comes from methylation. So that's like the MTHFR, MTRR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase gene, which is how we turn folic acid into the active form. Genetic variants there can very much affect our ability to make serotonin and dopamine as well. So we look at, that sort of pathway, the methylation going into the vitamin D receptor and then making serotonin and dopamine and breaking it down. So, depression, man, we're just seeing it go just so fast. I haven't seen a case where it didn't work. I mean, that's not a study, that's anecdotal, but it's been stunning. It's been stunning. After my, very quickly seeing my brain come alive, sometimes people on the first dose, they go, wow, my brain just came on. That's amazing. And I love that. That's so rewarding to see them light up. Yeah. The brain is happy.
Yeah.
Here's this is another interesting piece of it. Altitude has an effect on our brain chemistry. So when we go up past 2,000 feet in altitude, I imagine you say meters, or I don't even know what it translates to. We're so stuck in the old algorithms. But anyway, anything past 2,000 feet, your serotonin levels go up. No, sorry, they go down. Dopamine goes up, serotonin goes down. Anything past 2,000 feet. So it's like the suicide belt. Out here in the Rockies, much higher incidence of depression at higher altitudes.
Wow. Really? That's so interesting.
Yeah, because the lower oxygen lowers your serotonin. So when you go down to the beach, are you near the beach? Where are you?
Yeah, near the water.
Oh, nice. So you're at low altitude, so your serotonin levels are going to be higher. So for somebody who has an MAO, it's going to make them worse. If they've got a VDR, it'll make them better. So, you can tell, ask somebody, do you feel better when you're in the mountains? Do you feel better when you're at the beach?
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very interesting because thinking about my family actually comes from the mountains. Ancestry-wise, yeah. High up, not near the beach. They're from Herzegovina, Bosnia and Herzegovina, near Croatia.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah, in the mountains. Yeah. So farm family. So, but interesting, very interesting to, look at that. That's such an interesting aspect.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. So,
the whole genetic thing is fascinating, how it interacts with our environment, and our environment interacts with our genes, and our diet interacts with our genes.
Are you able to just briefly, I know this is probably coming to the end of it, but just run down what serotonin and dopamine is for individuals that are listening, because they're like, oh, you're talking about serotonin and dopamine, but can you just briefly outline what they do and, what they do?
Well, yeah, they're brain chemicals, or brain hormones, I should say. And serotonin, everybody knows about serotonin, sort of like it's our happy hormone, but it's also, we look at levels. Too high is not good, because that can make you really irritable and grouchy. Too low is going to make you depressed. So it's, we want serotonin in kind of in the middle range there. Dopamine is more reward hormone. So it's, when you get a good grade, or you get, you win the lottery, or, somebody pats you on the back and says, good job. Then dopamine is secreted, and it makes you feel good, because it's like, oh, I just got a hit, I just got a dopamine hit of reward. And, it kind of lights up your brain and fills up those dopamine receptors, and your brain goes, yay, I'm happy. It can be sugar, or it can be, lots of things can fire up dopamine. So dopamine.
Your phone.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So people are on their cell phone, and bing, they've got a hit, they've got a text or a phone call. Boom. It makes you addicted to that phone, because you're looking for the next dopamine hit. So it's they have different effects in the brain, different kind of mechanisms for mood generation, or mood balancing. Those are our main neurotransmitters. We have others. We have GABA, again, that we mentioned, which is our calming neurotransmitter. And then we have excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate. Histamine is another one. A lot of people don't understand the nature of histamine, which is like, a lot of people have allergies, and you can have a genetic variant that doesn't allow you to break down histamine correctly, which causes you to be genetically susceptible to allergies. But histamine is also a neurotransmitter. It's good for wakefulness. So maybe if you have allergies and you've ever taken an antihistamine, you probably know how you get sleepy. It's because you just lowered your histamine levels. So having enough histamine or not too much, it's all about balance. It's all about not too much, not too little, getting that sweet spot for our neurotransmitters or our brain chemicals, where we feel content and happy and life is good.
Yeah. So if you had to break down 3 genes that impact our mental health dramatically, what would they be? The 3?
That's the VDR, the COMT, and the MAO. That triangle.
Bam, bam.
That's it. It's like, that's where bipolar is. That's where the OCD is. That's where anxiety, aggression, irritability. It's all right there. The depression, the ADD is all right there. So that's a big piece of it. But we also do look at, there's a lot of peripheral genes, but those are really the hub genes for our brain chemistry. So understanding, do you have a MAO with a COMT, or a VDR with a COMT, or a VDR with an MAO? What's the arrangement that you have really determines what your brain chemistry is going to be like. And I can look at a report and just go, bam, I know exactly all about you. And then we modify it, with those that dopamine receptor genes and the GAD genes and the, some of the other genes. The methylation genes. So I can look at it. It's really fun to look at a report and go, all right, I'm going to tell you all about yourself. Don't tell me anything. I'm going to tell you.
Let me get my ball out.
It makes you look like a mind reader. It's like, oh, you got this going on and that going on and that going on.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other day I was out, and unfortunately the waitress wasn't the happiest, especially because she had a lot of stress going on. There was a lot of stress happening, and usually I would be like, oh, what's happening? But I just sat back and I said to my partner, and I said, that's okay. I excuse her for her brain chemistry.
What I usually say is, oh, look, there's an MAO.
Sounds like me, definitely, 100%. Yeah. So how does food impact our genes? I know we spoke a little bit about it due to the nutrients, the cofactors, and something along those lines. Is there any other way that it can impact our genes?
Yeah, very much so. So let's take the MAO, for instance, the monoamine oxidase, the one that breaks down serotonin. That person would want to stay away from anything that increases serotonin. And those are foods with tryptophan in them. So we look at their genetic report and it'll show, stay away from the obvious turkey. Bananas are high in tryptophan, spinach, chocolate, aged cheeses. So we counsel people on like, okay, you already are back to your serotonin levels are already too high and you're irritable. Don't, try to avoid these foods as much as possible. You don't have to be a 100% teetotaler, but this is going to make this worse. So same with like a COMT, we would counsel them on don't do caffeine because that's going to make adrenaline and you're not going to be able to break it down. It's going to make you even more anxious, looking at green tea, looking at things, like that are stimulating in the body. Yeah, you're going to want to avoid that because your body genetically can't break them down. We talked about like the gluten for some people that have those gluten genes need to stay away from that. We're going to increase your resilience by giving you cofactors, but it's never going to be your friend. So we can give you a good sense of like, where's your best diet? Stay away from the bananas and the turkey and the tryptophan foods. Stay low on those. Sulfur foods are another biggie for people who have that sulfur transferase enzyme. They can't break down sulfur. These people are often, sensitive to wine and beer, onions and garlic, broccoli, cabbage, those things that are high in sulfur, coconut.
And they're all seen as healthy foods, aren't they?
I know, right? You think, oh, those are supposed to be healthy. Yeah, not if you can't break down sulfurs. So we counsel them on, you're going to have to stay low on these. The sulfur, do you know much about the sulfur?
Not too much.
It's a fascinating one. And I find it to be the source of a lot of like digestive issues, emotional issues too. And respiratory, they'll have like these people have this cough that you can't figure out, like this chronic cough that isn't an infection, and it's not an allergy, it's sulfur, and it causes like a lot of bronchial irritation and gastrointestinal irritation that you can't figure out, so it's, I don't know what's going on here. This is so bizarre. And it's often, that's a sulfur and an itch, like there's no rash there, but they're scratching. They're like, they itch and they're like, it's under the skin. It feels like I can't, every time I itch, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
Like, bam, that's sulfur. You're not getting sulfur out of your body. So we'll tell them, stop the onions and garlic and all the sulfur foods, and huge change. So definitely there's a lot we can tell you about, where your best diet is. And even often that alone can make a huge difference in somebody's health and life.
Yeah. So someone who's got to increase their mental well-being, they want to increase their mental well-being. They've tried literally everything they can think of. They've seen this practitioner, that practitioner, and they get those days where they're just like, you know what, this this is going to be for the rest of my life. Or they're taking pharmaceuticals and they're like, this is what I'm going to take for the rest of my life. They've just kind of accepted their, that's they're going to be.
Yeah.
How would the genetic test that you do, how would that help them?
Yeah, just number one, just understanding, just getting that information about why they are the way they are is the first step. Going, when they click open each of the genes, you can click on it and it opens up a window and it says, this gene breaks down your stress hormones and it's associated with anxiety, insomnia, ADD, da, da, da. You can click on those and it goes right to a study. So there's nothing in here that I didn't back up with a really good study from, like PubMed or National Institute of Health. They're all like really good peer-reviewed studies. So you click on that link and you go read the article. Oh my gosh, this explains why I do this. I get it. It's not me. It's my genes. I see what's happening. And then, the more they understand about their own body, then they can start to go, okay, I get it, and to not feel like that's just the way you are. Sorry, sucks to be you, but that I can work with that. I can understand how to work with that. And that knowledge is priceless, to start going, okay, I'm going to get, we call it a PhD in me. I'm going to get a PhD in me, and I'm going to understand why I am that way. Why am I so impulsive? Why am I so irritable? Why am I so anxious? Yeah. And how do I fix that? And that's where we started, was kind of like biohacking. And I think you referred to that when you did the introduction about how do we biohack? How do we make these bodies work better? And I'm on a mission to find out and to biohack as much as possible to keep us healthy. My mom is my best guinea pig. She's 95. Wow. Still going strong, no health issues, great attitude, still lives by herself, And
you've definitely done her gene profile.
Yeah. And so, we definitely saw some things there, but she still has her martini every night. Who am I to argue with? She's 95 years old. She can have her martini. Makes her happy.
I'll make it for you.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool to see that, people look at her and they go, you're 95. You look like you're maybe 80. She looks amazing for her age. And I think there's a lot we can do to prevent a lot of the diseases and the aging and the deterioration that can, we think we're doomed to, and we're going to die. I mean, I get that, but
I love that. We're all going to die.
Well, it turns out maybe, but I think we can delay it. I think we can live more healthily and robustly without medication. She's on no medications except one little blood pressure medication. So I think that's possible, so it's really fun. She's I call her the lab rat. I'm going to get her a little t-shirt. This is lab rat.
I love that.
I'm experimenting on how long can we keep her going and keep her healthy and keep her happy.
Yeah, I do same to my mom. So she listens to this podcast and I'm like, she's got this. I'm like, try this, try that. Is this working? Is this not working? She's like, how come I'm doing this? And I'm like, oh, just go.
Just take it.
Yeah, just trust me. I love that.
My mom's that way too. She's like, okay, whatever. Pops it in her mouth.
Yeah. I love that. Absolutely love that. I love that. You got support from family in regards to what you're doing, and that's absolutely amazing. So coming to the end of the podcast, if you can put down some practical tips to our audience to incorporate to balance their their mental well-being to make up for their genes, what could it be without knowing without knowing their tests and things like that? What would be some practical tips?
That is hard without, looking at your genes. But, I think there's some obvious things like the things I mentioned. If you're grouchy, watch those tryptophan foods. I mean, for gosh sakes, don't do 5-hydroxytryptophan, 5-HTP or tryptophan supplements. Watch those. And then, for people with anxiety, the pretty obvious is caffeine. It's really going to keep you from breaking down your stress hormones, your adrenaline and all that. Avoid stress. How do you like that one?
I love it.
Never thought of that, did you? You didn't think of that?
No. Never given that as advice ever. I think that's definitely something to think about.
But it's funny. Eat right. You hear doctors saying, eat right and avoid stress. It's like, okay, I'll do that.
Great.
What does that mean?
What are the guidelines about it?
Yes. But I think it's so powerful to get your genes tested. And, the cool thing is if you already have Ancestry and 23andMe, you can actually run our reports and get some decent information from those. So if you've already paid for those and already shared your genetics with the world, then you can actually buy our reports. And if you go to myhappygenes.com, you can buy them. It's $49 for the mood and personality report, and $79 for both the diet and the mood report. And there's so much information in there. So that's a really good place to start. If you're just tiptoeing into your understanding your genetics and just tear it apart. When I first started learning the genes, I was like, what's that gene do? I just like Google it and oh my gosh, look at that. Look at all the things it does. Oh, that's, so there's a lot to study. I think it's fascinating, but I'm kind of a nerd that way. But I think people really enjoy it. They really enjoy understanding their own genes and how they work. So that's the first step, is get in there and start digging around in your genetics. I think
start your PhD me.
Yeah.
Start it today. Get to know you.
Yeah.
I love that. So in regards to practical tips, I mean, the whole podcast is filled with practical tips. You've given us so much information, so much knowledge, so many, little hacks in there, what to do, what not to do, and so forth. So really appreciate that. But to finish off, I ask all my guests, as this is the Natural Health Podcast, what is your best kept natural health hack? What's a little health hack Jay wants to share?
Wow. An open-ended question. I think, really for me, and it's not that long that I've been actually doing this, is focusing on taking care of myself. It's, as women especially, we're always taking care of everybody else. Getting enough sleep, getting at least a little exercise, not having to push yourself to the absolute exhaustion limits, but just all the little things that, you can stop during the day and check in. How am I doing? Am I exhausted? Do I need to rest? Do I need to eat? And listening to your body, I guess that would be my biggest tip. And that's where, a lot of people don't listen to their bodies. They eat a food and they don't realize that they feel terrible or they feel good. So I think checking in, listening, and some self-care would be, I think, one of the biggest things that we can do.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. So for anyone who's been listening to this podcast and is like, I want to know where to get more information, how to get in touch, where to start, what to do, how can they contact your company and what can they do?
Yeah, so it's myhappygenes.com. So it's simple to go on there and take a look. The course, if they're interested in learning more, it's holistic methylation. I know that's a mouthful. Maybe you can put that in the notes.
Yeah, I'll definitely put everything in the show notes 100%.
Okay. It's with a W, holistic methylation. And again, that's a bit of a mouthful, but it's really a primer on understanding the genetics and understanding your physiology. And even lay people can get in there and go, I try to make it as simple as possible and easy to understand. And I think there's a lot that they can get out of it too, especially if they're starting to do the biohacking thing and understand their genes. You can really learn a lot there. So I've got a bunch of videos on YouTube that are primers as well that you can go in there and watch and see a little more of an explanation about what's happening in the genetics. So lots of resources on
brilliant. Yeah.
On those. Yeah. Holisticmethylation.com and then myhappygenes.com.
Amazing.
So.
Definitely lots of information there. That's absolutely amazing. Well, thank you, Jay, for so much for taking your time out to be on the Natural Health Podcast. Really appreciate it. And the audience is like, their mind is just blowing with all the information that you shared with them today.
Very cool. Thank you. And I'm going to try to say your name, Mihaela. Mihaela. Okay. That's a tough one, but thank you so much. I appreciate your asking me to come on your podcast. You've got some amazing podcasts. I went in and looked at your subjects and they were like, wow, this is cool. I need to go in and listen to some of your past episodes and catch up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Well, thank you for joining us at Natural Health Podcast. And remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health.